Hello again. Looks like the volume was way too loud on part one, so I hope to have corrected that in this one. Sorry if I blew out your eardrums in the last one, but we're going to move forward. We wrapped up the last part of the chapter ending on social engineering, which is how we can use your behaviors or just intrinsic parts of how you interact with the computer against you to reveal information. So we're going to finish security threats and press on through the chapter. Okay, so let's move right into unintentional security threats. And this is things that we call it unintentional, but these are just accidents. These are things that happen. No one did it on purpose. There's no one that we can really lay the finger on in most instances. This isn't a security threat that we can prevent against other than making sure that we are taking our time and doing things correctly. One that really we can't control against is natural disasters. And when we think about a security plan, our goal is to create a system to where we can respond to natural disasters, but we really cannot prevent natural disasters from happening. Think back to the Corvette Museum. I'm sure they had a lot of security things in place. They probably did not predict a sinkhole opening up underneath very high value Corvettes. So this is an example of a natural disaster. We also accidental deletion of data. We've all done this personally on our personal computers, and this happens in big business as well. And then finally, structural failures, where just wear and tear on some things just give out. And that creates, a security threat, because if that wear and tear is in a critical portion of the machine, then, that can lead to some unintended consequences. So that kind of wraps up our security threats. Let's go back to the security plan we've been talking about, and let's look at some of the constituents of a comprehensive security system. So we've got biometric security, non-biometric measures, physical security measures. That's, pretty straightforward. Access control, VPN, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Data encryption, e-commerce, and an emergency response team. And all of these play a critical piece at different stages in, the entire comprehensive security plan. So let's look at biometric. Now, you probably have a biometric security feature that you deal with every day on your smartphone. A lot of us have iPhones or the modern Android phones. They have biometric features to them. And this is where we use physiological portions or elements of a person, things that are not easily impersonated. We say cannot be stolen, copied, or passed on, but they cannot be easily stolen, copied, or passed on. We've seen plenty of spy movies where people impersonate these different things. Even the Mythbusters found their way to get past a fingerprint scanner. But these things cannot be easily broken into. And it's things like the structure of your face, the structure of your retina, your fingerprints, your palm prints, your signature, vein analysis. I know when I was going through trying to get into graduate school, I took the GMAT. Some of you may have the GMAT in your future, and they had a vein scanner that you had to scan your vein, your hand vein, before you started the test. And then every time you went to the restroom or took a break, you had to scan your hand again, and they made sure that vein in your hand was what it was before you took it, so no one could impersonate you taking the test. And then finally, voice recognition. And we use this as human beings. You recognize the voices of people that you know and love, and some people you probably don't love or like. And that too is something that is very unique to one individual. So biometric is looking for those unique things to individuals that are not easily impersonated. Of course, on the flip side of that coin are non-biometric security measures. And these are things that are technology based that help verify someone based on them having authorized access to other types of technology. Like a callback modem is when the user is called back from where they're supposed to be to verify they're at the location they're supposed to be at. We also see this in passwords with two-step verification. On my Gmail account, I make sure that not only do I have to put in the password, but after I put in the password, it will send me a text message with a code. And then I use that code to then get access to my email. And that just makes sure that the only way someone can break into my email account is if they A, have my password, and B, have my phone, which is rare. You know, the only person who typically has my phone is me, or you may catch one of my kids with it from time to time. And then finally, a firewall. And a firewall is just something that blocks access for unauthorized users at some point in a network. Now, a lot of times it's a piece of software, or it couldn't be on a physical device like on your router. But, you know, to illustrate this a little bit, let's take a look at kind of a basic firewall. Here's the network we're on. We'll call this our home computer, our network computer, our work servers, okay? And then here's the internet over here. This is all of the knowledge in the world, if you will. This is where our customers are, and this is also where hackers are. Well, in this firewall, what we do is it will screen out customer data, gets to come all the way in, and then responses to customer goes all the way out. But let's say we have a denial of service attack, or we have a someone who's trying to impersonate a customer but isn't doing a very good job. They will hit this firewall and then just get sent right back out. So this is kind of like the security guard at the front gate of, you know, a big nice house. The job of this firewall is to keep out stuff that should not be getting in. And we do it with software, and we can also do it with hardware, physical devices. To go a little bit further, instead of just having a firewall, we can use something called a proxy server. Now, what a proxy server does is we have everything that's important to us connect to a different server, and then that different server connects us to the internet. So what this means is that where we are connecting to the internet from is completely hidden from the internet. The only thing that the internet can see is this proxy server. And this does a good job because if someone is trying to compromise the system, they will only be able to compromise the proxy server and not compromise our different servers that we have back here behind this proxy wall, okay? And we'll see proxy again when we look at VPNs. Now, another system in place is an intrusion detection. And what this does is this is in front of the firewall. So, you know, the firewall was between us and the internet, and it's in front of the firewall. And it stands there, and it detects whether or not someone is trying to run those attacks on us. So think of it as like a lookout. And then once this lookout detects that those attacks are happening, it will just start cutting off connections to those attacks before they can get through. So in essence, if you know that imagine that you are holding a wick to a bomb, well, once the wick gets lit, it'll just cut the wick so it doesn't ignite the bomb. So that's what those detection systems do. The book will probably cover that a little bit better. Also, we have some physical security measures. Now we've moved off of the biometric, non-biometric. Now we're in physical. And these are things we can do to the actual hardware to protect it. We can shield the cables. We can bolt the hardware down. We can make people use identification badges and track where our staff is. We can make people have to be in a certain proximity to doors for them to open, and steel encasement. So in essence, these are the physical things. You know, I know at my doctor's office, to get to the back to the patient area from the waiting room, someone has to press a button that releases a lock that allows me to walk in. You probably, in the residence halls, if you live on campus, there are vestibules where you have to have a key, a room key, just to get from the vestibule into the main waiting area. It's these type of physical layers of protection just kind of amped up that we see in these information systems, all right? And what we just talked about is a good example of access control, which is where you just protect who gets access to the system computers. So you don't allow people who aren't authorized to even get close to it. Now, you know, some things we do when this unauthorized access happens, you know, we can do terminal resource security, which is at the terminal, the computer that interacts, and have it automatically time people out or shut the computer down after so much inactivity. You may experience this with Blackboard if you stay logged in too long. Passwords. I think we know what passwords are at this point. If you're unclear on passwords, that's troubling, because we should know what passwords are. We know it's numbers and symbols and characters. And I hope that you're using a secure password. If you're not, we may look into that a little bit later. You know, here's an opportunity. If you are unclear about passwords and want to learn a little bit more, shoot me an email and we can talk about that as a class. If I get enough feedback, we'll go over how to make very secure passwords. Next is a VPN. And we looked at this earlier when we called it a proxy, because a proxy is where we are connecting our network to another computer network, and then that network allows us to gain access to the internet. Well, a VPN is a lot like a proxy, except for it is secure, which means that it's encrypted, and that it's encrypted at a level that no one can see the information that we are transmitting to this VPN. Once data from the internet hits the VPN, it becomes a black hole and no one can track it. Excuse me. I personally use a VPN for my personal computing. Not that I'm doing anything very interesting or magical with my computer most of the time, but I do like knowing that I have this level of security in this day and age where identity theft is rampant on the internet. Now, most corporate policies are going to require people who are working from home, doing telecommuting, to interface with a VPN at some point to make sure that they're not transmitting work-sensitive information in an insecure manner. And a good example of something that's insecure is your email. Western has a computing policy which restricts us from sending 800 numbers through an email, and that's to protect you all. You know, what if a staff member or faculty has their computer and they shoot an email with an unsecure email with your student information on it, and then that's compromised and leads to some manipulation of your student records? Well, to prevent against that, the policy doesn't allow us to use insecure measures of communicating via email. And that's an example of a VPN where you can overcome that insecurity of the network by connecting to a virtual private network set up by your employer or a VPN source that you trust and regain that security. Okay. And we talked about how the data is encrypted. Well, let's talk about what encryption is. And encryption is just transforming, almost like the movies, you know, transforming this text, this plain text, into something that is unrecognizable. You know, it's ciphertext, it's scrambled. It's something that you don't, if you were to look at it, you wouldn't know what it is. And there's some rules to do this well. And, you know, the process that are in these rules, we call it an algorithm, but an algorithm is just kind of a series of steps that we can write down and reproduce. And those algorithms respect certain protocols. Now, if you remember CIS 141, protocols are just a subset of rules that behave in certain systems. For encryption, we have kind of two prominent protocols: secure sockets layer, and this works right at the transmission level of the internet. And then there's transport layer security, which works at a little bit higher network level. But both of these allow us to encrypt data. And if you're using it right now, your email is being sent over SSL and TLS connections every time you use it. If you've ever set your email up on your phone, you probably had to visit the IT page on how email is, and you had to choose one of these two different layers for you to, well, not choose, but actually indicate which of these layers you're going to use on your email. This security is becoming more and more integrated into the systems we have. And not only is it becoming integrated in your personal life, but it's definitely becoming integrated at the business level. You know, if you are a financial analyst or if you are an IT professional, you want to make sure that the intellectual property you're creating throughout the day is protected as you communicate with your coworkers. You know, you're going to be working in a team environment. It's going to require communication, and that communication needs to be only between the creator and its intended recipients. Now, we can do this in a couple different ways, and they mostly include a key. And a key, it sounds like it is exactly what it sounds like. It is something used to unlock the scrambled text we talked about. Now, with a public key infrastructure, there is kind of one trusted authority. It's one person, well, not one person, one site that has been designated by all the users to, you can trust this place to go get a key, okay? And the keys come in two different types. One is asymmetric, which is where there is a key that everyone uses, known as the public key. And then there's also a private key that the recipient has, and the recipient uses their key to unlock the message that was sent to them that was encrypted with the public key. So if you think about it, imagine that in your apartment, home, wherever you live, that your door has two locks on it. And what happens is it has, the first lock can lock it, and the second lock can unlock the first lock. So they both have separate keys, and both keys can be used to unlock and lock, but those keys cannot be used in the other locks. It's a little weird. The book goes better into this. I don't think I'm doing a good job explaining it. I get it, and I want you to get it. So I want you to think about this a couple times. Asymmetric means there's two different keys, but they can both unlock the same data. And these keys, one comes from a trusted source, the other is specific to the recipient, okay? Now, this is different than a symmetric system. And, you know, the clue here is in the name. Asymmetry, asymmetric, and symmetric, symmetry. So if asymmetric means there's two different keys, symmetry means there's one key. And this is exactly what this system is. It's a system where we have one key and both the recipient and the sender use it. And both people have to agree on this key, and they have to keep it a secret. Otherwise, they can compromise all those communications, okay? The last thing I want to look at, well, not the last, but the next thing is e-commerce security. And, you know, e-commerce is very important because we're worried about confidentiality, authentication, integrity, the whole kit and caboodle. What we purchase talks to who we are. And it's very important that security systems take into account protecting not only our buying information, our transactional information, but we also need to take into account what we're purchasing. So when we think about security, e-commerce has its own kind of subset of things we need to be concerned with. And I want you to make sure you're understanding those by doing the readings. All right. So let's talk about how we respond to these issues. Most network, a good plan will have a computer emergency response team. This idea was developed during the 1980s. It's focused on security breaches and big attacks. And typically this team will offer kind of guidelines and advice and guidance on how to handle attacks and how to prevent attacks. So think of this as kind of the network's network security law enforcement agency. It's an emergency response team. It's almost more like FEMA. They come in and they help wade through the emergency of some type of digital attack on a system. And most of these teams should have something called a cyber incident response capability, which means that they can quickly respond. And I'm going to snap again. Quickly respond to something that's happening and respond in an appropriate manner to make sure that they can first limit the scale of what's happening, fix the particular issue that's happening, and then prevent it from happening again. So they're going to provide training, they're going to analyze threats and vulnerabilities, and they're going to make recommendations to keep this stuff from happening one more time. And then there's some legal aspects to this. When we look at, you know, guidelines to making a comprehensive plan. We want to make sure that we understand the litigation out there. Well, I'm sorry. The law that really governs the behavior in this area. For this in particular, we're talking about Sarbanes-Oxley. And this one came out in 2002. It was after the .com bust. And it talks to a lot of different things. Look at it in the book. I don't think we go too deep into this, but it's something you should think about. We need to do basic risk analysis. And that's the common sense stuff. Analyze how we're using financial data, how we're budgeting, how organizations weigh the cost of a security system. And this has been very critical. In most of the data breaches that have happened recently, it has been that the technology was there to prevent the breach, but it was expensive. And so those companies did not undertake those protective measures that they could have to avoid the breach. And then, something you should answer for yourself is that a good enough reason not to protect sensitive data? And it's not just the data of the organization, but that of their customers. What is the obligation that the organization has to protecting data? And that would definitely be in a comprehensive security system plan. All right, and then the last thing is kind of a continuity of planning, where it's not just one person in a vacuum making these plans. We have a management crisis team. We have contacted the stakeholders, our insurance company. We make sure that our communication lines are available. This continuity means that we can continue to do business while we have suffered from such an attack. And the thing that the government has recently stepped in deciding how soon people must be notified. Because companies sometimes, to save face, delay the notification of what has happened until after it would no longer affect a busy season. I think we had a number of retailers last year that suffered very, very damaging cyber attacks, but they didn't reveal that they had suffered the attack until well after, Black Friday and the holiday season. So, this speaks to corporate trust. This speaks to whether or not your organization is doing what people think it's doing and the ethics of your organization. And it's something we should think about. In response to the attack, probably set up a help desk to help people navigate the issues and set up a website to that, just getting information out. And then finally, documenting all actions taken. That way, this can help in future planning for the continuity and for kind of comprehensive security. So in a nutshell, we have covered quite a bit in these two parts. I would like for you to look over the beginning of the chapter. After you read it, look over those key terms at the beginning. There are quite a few that we looked at here, going from availability to backdoor to you name it. So be familiar with those terms. The test is coming up. If you're watching the end of this, you'll see an announcement on Wednesday morning that speaks to what I'm about to say to you. I'm going to give you a little extra time. We're going to have the test start on Sunday and go until Tuesday. So you'll have an opportunity this weekend to review all of the previous 4 chapters we've covered. If you are struggling at this point with the terminology that we're using as a foundation, if the word processor is causing you to pause, take a look at chapter 2. We did not cover it in the lecture. We're not going to cover it in the lecture, but chapter 2 does set a basic framework to which all these other things are built. So if you're struggling, if the things we're saying in the lecture, the things I'm saying in the lecture are not being easily comprehended, then we can overcome that deficit by chapter 2. Okay. So Sunday through Tuesday, the first exam will be available. Tomorrow, well, at the time of this recording, which I'm recording it on Tuesday, on Wednesday, the practice test will be available in the afternoon. So you'll be able to get in there, practice the questions. The practice test, the grade does not matter, but it will have questions that may appear on the test in it. So this is your opportunity to get an idea of what the test may look like. You're going to get 45 seconds per question. I'm also going to cover this in the announcement. So, you're not going to get a whole lot of time to spend on one question, because this is not an open book test. It is not, I realize it's a web course, but that doesn't mean that you can sit in front of the test with your book open and just scan for the answers. So you're going to have to know this stuff. You're going to have to respond quickly. And the practice test will be structured so you can get a sense of how much time you have to get this stuff done. It's very similar to the quizzes. So at this point, I think we have covered chapter 5. In the next part, we're going to look at some different aspects of information systems. We're going to have some reading and some review and some essay assignments. And of course, we're about to transition from those first 5 Excel projects to the next 5 and the Access project in the next few weeks. So if you're in SAMS and you're not getting caught up, you need to get caught up, because we're about to move into the heavier lifting portion of the course. So thank you for your time, and good luck on the test.